It's the individual voice that makes the culture. Culture is so precious. It's like we don't know what we have until we lose it. And now we're losing the Kennedy Center because one man doesn't like the kind of performances that are going on there, and so we'll get what he likes. And that's how culture begins to dwindle down. So it's that individual mark that makes that culture. That's what develops the culture. And it's what develops our own mark, our own individual mark. So that's a big stretch, but it's one I believe in, that I'm living by. That first mark that we make as a doodle is it's something that's very kinesthetic. They say it's not in our mind. It's not visually something that we want when we do that. Maybe a sibling left their colors on the floor and we crawl over and we just grab one and we make a mark. And it's a very kinesthetic experience. That, wow, that sense of I can do something that is outside of myself and it's mine. It's my mark. I did that. Though you might have read about it in my book when I made my mark on the newly wallpapered wall of our rented apartment, wrote my name in lipstick on the wall, and fortunately for me I had a very supportive mother and supportive father, and I was not reprimanded for this. I got the message that it would be better if I didn't do all the walls in the room. It's enough now. So this is that mark making that we will do naturally if we're not reprimanded for it. And the doodling is another thing. You've probably had the experience of doodling when you're listening to a lecture, and you might be reprimanded or feel reprimanded for doing such a thing. But I think that when something has become so tiresome, so tedious, so boring, we start to do this. And it's establishing ourselves in a space where we're beginning to drift away. We establish ourselves by doing this doodle. And unfortunately, it's been given, or the name it's been given, as now so derogatory that we think it's a waste of time, or I was just doodling. It doesn't count. It doesn't matter. It was just a doodle. And that's the tough part about it, is that we stop at that point and are discouraged from going further. Because the problem with establishing the individual is that the next thing that happens is that if individuals who have a voice don't like what's going on, they organize. And when they organize, you have anarchy. So that's what's going on right now. The individuals are organizing downtown, all over the country. My grandkids in Minnesota organized in front of the state building yesterday. It's happening everywhere because people are sensing that they're beginning to lose their voice. They might lose their voice. So it's, I remember I was with Carl Rogers, who is the Presbyterian minister who became a renowned psychologist, and he developed the person-centered approach to therapy. The person-centered approach. The Christian Church invited him to South Africa to teach the person-centered approach. And I was with him the morning that the phone rang, and he was told that he was uninvited to South Africa. He will not be coming to South Africa. We will have none of that person-centered business. And that's the church in its archaic form coming down, perhaps being pressured by the government. Don't know. But Carl, that was when he first realized that the person-centered approach had a political base to it. That in a country, you're not going to have that kind of thing going on. So it's a big thing to understand, but it's an important thing to understand. So I'd like for us to understand that today, understand your own, and I'd like to begin with, I think everybody has a pen or pencil. If you don't, raise your hand please, and we'll make sure you do. I'd like for you to just sign this white piece of paper in front of you at least 20 times. The way you would sign a check. Sign your name, please. Just like a check. Mm. And so would each of you just hold yours up? I am Coeleen Kiebert. And please introduce yourself. Just holding it up. Janice, would you start?
I am Janice Skinner.
Thank you. Yeah. Carry on.
I am Olivia Richard.
I am Judy Dave.
Amy Martin.
Jean Hera.
I am Rita Watson.
I am Jessica Lee.
Danielle Wolf.
Kim Tyler.
Anna Durante. I've already started doodling.
All right, now imagine, let's get a fresh sheet of paper. Next piece.
The drawing paper.
Yeah, well, no, just a piece of newsprint will do, I think. Actually, whichever feels best to you. And let's open up your crayons. Open up your oil sticks. And this is always like Christmas, isn't it? To open up a new box of, yeah. The next thing that we do, imagine that you're crawling on the floor and you see this box sitting on the floor. If you are right-handed, take your left hand and let your left hand pick a color, and vice versa. If you're left-handed, let your right hand pick a color, and just let the color start to happen on this paper. With your opposite hand, yes. You know, something that happens too fast, you do this, and an adult comes along and says, oh, how beautiful. What is it? What is it? And immediately you say, oh, it's a tree. It's a tree. That's what it is. And because we don't want to be so strange, so we make it into something too fast. And there's this whole wonderful place between when we've started the doodle and when we begin to turn it into a house, a tree, a person. It's that precious place in between where your mark starts to happen. So let's take about 15 minutes now and carry on with whatever colors you want to work with. We'll be silent, no talking, because every time you start to talk, you short circuit that right brain. Every time, and we've got to cut that out when we're together working. Yes?
Are using our correct hand or our opposite?
You can do either now. Go back and forth, see what the difference is. All right, let's stop now and have the person across from you hold it up so that you can look at yours like this, so that you can look at it and see what is needed when you look at it. What is needed? You have a sense, Janice?
No, you can hold it to me and
What is needed? More color. All right. Uh, is everybody finished with that? Have you all looked? Do you have a sense of what's needed? Now that is your aesthetic working. That sense of what's needed. It needs what? More lines, needs more color, it needs more black, it needs something over there. This is empty over there. I ought to put something in up here. You know, it's in your aesthetic. Something, when you look at it, something is needed. So let's take 2 minutes to develop it. So now let's take a few minutes to just share with the people at your table what you did to change your drawing. So share that with each other, what you knew needed to be done and what you did.
I added text that. So I wanted a flower to control that. Colorful behind them, but he wanted red. So he got red. Do it here. Into a little guy. I integrated it.
Okay, now put these underneath. We're going to go to a fresh piece of paper, so put these underneath also. So this is great. What kinds of things are you finding out about your doodle or your mark or yourself? Yes. It's better to use your...
I really enjoyed the not thinking.
The not, and you did that with your non-dominant hand? Yeah. Yeah, great. Yeah. What did you find out in your...
I always see it. I always find the face, whether I'm looking at my linoleum floor or my doodles.
Uh-huh, okay. Does anybody else have that inclination? Yes. Yeah. How does it happen? I see you shaking your head.
It just comes up and I have to make it happen, and then I try not to make it happen, but it happens anyway.
Okay.
And then I ask it what it wants to say, and then we have a long conversation.
Okay. Anybody else have that happening, that you turn it into something pretty fast? Yes.
But I like what you said about not turning it into something.
Yes.
To just keep with the doodle, because our brains are made to make sense of meaning.
Yeah, right.
We have to sort of find it anyway.
Yeah. And you know, developing your non-dominant hand, they've found with stroke victims that those who are both right-hand and left-handed recover much more quickly and fully. The left-handers recover faster than the right-handers. I'm favoring my right shoulder right now, and so I'm finding that I'm doing things with my left hand and arm that I don't ordinarily do, and I'm thinking, this is good. You know, this is good that I'm developing another part of myself at the same time that I'm taking care of myself. Becoming aware of how quickly we want to make something of it. One of the things that we do quickly is when you look at the clouds in the sky, and you say, oh, it looks just like mountains, or it looks just like a bird flying through there, or it looks like a man doing something. That's our inability to just stay in the here and now with the cloud. You know, look at the way the cloud is rolling, you know, how it's moving within the white space. And there are places that are dark, more dense than other places. And it makes it look like it's got these long trails. You know, if I were a cloud, I'd like to be described that way, rather than saying she looks just like an elephant or she looks just like a da-da-da, you know, quickly. So this is what's happening as it's beginning to develop your ability to stay in the here and now with it. Because in studying the psychology of artists, that's the difference, is developing that ego strength. And this is the way that happens, is the development of your own mark, your own voice. You know, so all the work that you see in the exhibit right now is that. It's the result of people developing their doodle, which is their style, or going into their unconscious in order to invite images from their unconscious, and bringing that forth, staying with themselves and going forth with their own mark. So you can see that each person has their own style. You can tell one person's work from another, which I think that started my interest in this when I was, 30 years old and teaching ceramics at the local settlement house in Chicago. Why is it that you can always tell who did what? You know, it just always shows. And then starting to study the psychology of the artist. And at that time, and probably still today, the opinion is that the artist is a pretty kooky person. It's a strange person, we don't need them, and you know, over there, be quiet. And that's got to change. And how does that change, and who are the ones who were able to take their art forward and enjoy their art and enjoy their lives with art even, you know, that is such a necessary drive that we have in ourselves to do. Okay, take a straight color and draw a straight line from end to end on the paper. Just a straight line. Now, pick a color that does not like straight lines and draw a line that does not like straight lines. This is anarchy. So this is a vocabulary that we have inside of us. So Janice, tell us what about the line that does not like straight lines. What happened? How did you tell us that?
It got a little rebellious.
Yeah, it dares to
The straight line.
crosses over that straight line even. And this is a good example. Again, I'm glad to see these rebellious lines going through the straight lines. This is wonderful. So here's another really good one. Now the other thing I'm just reading about a psychologist from the late 1800s, Finbo Gusson, and he's talking about how we imitate art, or how art becomes an imitation of us, and that there's something about when we see a straight line like this, straight up and down, and you put your paper up and down, also, which is, I noticed you work, instead of working horizontally, you work vertically. This makes us stand up. It makes us stand up when we look at it, and the artists know this when they're painting, so it might even make me, like it's very full at the top, it might even make me fill my chest, my heart a bit when we do that. Now when we do it this way, it's very relaxing, very wonderfully, very meditative, very nice when we see the horizontal line. Then we want to relax. And so there's no judgment here. It's just the way we are. We do talk, with our art. here. So did anybody else do this? A line alongside? Yeah. Oh, you did yours going
I
through?
did disrupt the
Uh-huh.
line.
All right, but you also went through the straight line. Oh, and here we have a conversation going. This is wonderful. I mean, this might be, less aggressive and more into conversation. I'm not sure until you experience it. Oh, Karen, let's see
I
yours.
felt like mine was very aggressive. My line was pissed off.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. By the way, I want to say something about what's going on with our psyches now, this right brain, left brain idea, what's happening with psychology. I'm going to draw a picture of the psyche. And we have to get scientific about creativity. We've got to get better at knowing what it is that we're doing. Some of you know how important I think it is that we talk about the stages of the creative process, that we're going through a stage. The first stage is, I'm going to do something. I'm going to take that workshop. So you make a statement of intention, and then you go into gathering. And that's, what's it going to take to do that? How am I going to have to arrange my life in order to take that workshop? What do I know about doodles? What is it about doodles that I'm interested in? And we begin to play with that. You begin to get yourself here. Then another thing happens. It's like Maslow says, you can't create until you have the territory. So where are you going to do it? Where are you going to land here in this space? And once you land, you need to know that you can stay there. That now this is your space. You need to know that. There are these basic principles of creativity that we have not learned to live with yet. So now you're here, you've established that. Now we're beginning to connect the dots about creating. We're gathering the lines, the materials. What do we have to work with? Paper, crayons, and now we're doodling to wake up our energy and begin to connect the dots. What's the meaning of what it is that I'm doing? So I wanted to stop for a minute and just talk about the psyche and what it's doing in this process. So another thing I think we should know about creativity. Thank you. So here's our psyche. Here's our superego. Thank you, Sigmund Freud. Here's ego. And here's id. So our culture is very, 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 very Freudian. So we know all about this. The superego is running the show, or thinks it is. And the ego is in the service of the superego. And Freud said that which is in your unconscious is a big problem, so we're just going to keep it down. We'll just give you drugs to keep you away from it. You can try a little alcohol, that might feel better. We're just going to keep that down. We might talk about your dreams, but it'll be about how awful the unconscious is. So we're very ignorant about this part of ourselves as a Homo sapien. Anything to add to that? I would love if anybody. So enter Carl Jung. So Carl Jung says, well, yes, this is up here. We might call it the persona. And here is the ego, and the self is here. The true self. So here we get, this is the conscious part of our psyche. This is a little bit conscious, and this is the unconscious, and it's huge. So when we do art, there's two, to simplify this greatly, there's two ways of doing art. There's objective art, and there's abstract art. And so the Homo sapien is going through development of this psyche. So the most of our art is coming from here, maybe like this. And this is portraits, landscapes, still life. It's the things that we see outside of ourselves. That's what the artist was doing up until the late 1800s when Kandinsky kicked the can and changed things. So it was all coming from outside of ourselves, and most of us have been educated to do art outside of ourselves, and that's wonderful because that's where you hone your skills. That's how you learn to work with oil or with watercolor or charcoal or perspective, and that's wonderful. You need to hone your skills, so that's all happening here. But the abstract artists are changing the direction of the ego. You see, the artist up until then is doing everything they can to sell. It's got to be something that people understand when they look at it. Oh, that reminds me of such and so I want that. So that's been heavy duty here. Then along comes Frankenthaler and Kandinsky and Hilma af Klint, and they say, but what about what's going on down here? And Carl Jung says, this is the creative wellspring. This is where all the creative juice is coming from. Deep, deep within us. We're born with this. This comes with our DNA. That's big, big, big. It's collected to everything. We've got the whole encyclopedia. The whole AI is in our unconscious. It's there. So when you look at the work inside, you'll see that the subjects are very different that each person is working on. They've done a collage. I like to do collage on black paper and say, this is a dark stage. This is a stage. And there's all these characters backstage. And you're going to go through the magazines and you're going to pick characters that you want to come on stage. And then we're going to turn on the light and we're going to work with those images. And that takes a lot of nerve because who's going to buy that? So you have to back up. And so many artists today are saying, I'm stuck. And I think this is exactly where, because our society needs it. This is where the creative thinking comes, the creative problem solving comes. How do you solve the problem in Israel today? How do you solve the problem in Ukraine? How do you solve the problem here? With creative thinking. We've been doing this, what makes us look good, over and over and over and over. Power and persona. So now we're bringing the ego, the idea that in some meditation practices that we should get rid of the ego. That's a male design. It's very good for males to learn how to do. But I was horrified when I heard this for women. Oh my God, it's the last thing that should be going on, is this egoless state for women. My God. Carol Christ, in her book Diving Deep in Servicing, questions this. She says, little girls in the family are raised to take care of the egos of the males and to diminish their own. Now this makes sense. I just don't want to be put in a negative box about men, because we can't evolve without this coming together. But if you think about it, if you live in a tribe and you realize that the food that you're going to have that night has got to be caught and brought home, you're going to pick the guy that's got the most muscle. You're going to pick the guy that's the sharpshooter. You're going to go for that kind of male that can feed the family, take care of the children, give a bear skin to sleep on at night. So it's in us. We go for this kind of masculine, and we feed it. Of course we would feed it. You want the best that you can have for your family. So that's my example of the ego being in the service of what it is that we're doing here. But how many times have you heard a woman say, all right, I've done it. I took care of the family. They're off to school. Now it's my turn. Now it's my turn to do me. been taking care of people for half my life. It's my turn. You shift the direction of the ego to be in the service of the self. This is where the self is. And when Carl Jung went to Sigmund Freud and said, "This is what I have discovered," Freud said, "It sounds to me like you're saying you believe in a soul." Ed Jung says, "Well, yes, I do. This, here." And Freud was so upset, he picked up his books, slammed them on the desk. They say the books fell off the shelves in the room, that there was a crack of lightning. And that was the end of their relationship. Jung walked out, and that was the end of it. But thankfully for us, he shed light on this part of ourselves that is so rich that must be developed. So this is where the doodle is coming in, and this is where make it a house, make it a face, make it a da-da-da-da. That's where that's coming in. So here we get objective art, as Jung would call it. Objective art, you can see what the object is. And here we get abstract art over here. Does this make sense? Okay, so we get abstract art here. Now, how do we get great art? According to Jung, and I think it's the best I've heard so far, if you just do this, you're just going to doodle around all day. You're just going to doodle. There isn't anything that you want to say. What is it that you want to say? What does the line say? Or I just want to develop my doodle. Does that mean doing the same thing over and over and over? No. So Jung says, it's when this comes, I'm going to do it in a different color because I know it matters. When this, I'd like to make an art about the story of Eve and the apple. That's what's in there. And I'd like to do it in an imaginative way. Imaginative.
Hard to hear you.
Okay, I'd like to do it in an imaginative way, to bring up my mark, to play with it, to bring up something from the unconscious. I can't just paint the apple over and over, or I could paint Eve in the Garden of Eden with Lilith, the snake, but that's been done a lot, and besides, that's not what the world needs. You know, the meaning of it is what has to be brought up. So that's when you bring up, that's why some abstract art fades away and some abstract art withstands the test of time. Picasso knew what he was talking about. De Kooning knew what he was talking about. Joan Mitchell knew what she was talking about. A Summer Day on the Sound. Frankenthaler doing the same thing. Cape Cod. Santa Fe in the Rain. These are beautiful paintings which she has brought the objective, the idea that she wants to talk about, and her style up with which to do it. So please ask questions if this doesn't make sense to you, because I think it's so important for us to know. So because this is so powerful, this unconscious, this is a collective unconscious, it's coming up all the time. And so there isn't anything that any of us does that's original. It's all coming up from the unconscious, and we are the vehicle for it. And this is the map, as far as I'm concerned. This is the map for it. So, you know, if you've ever been working with a sculpture, say, or a painting, and you don't know where it's going, but you stay with it, and then there's that, I get it. Oh, I get it, you know, and the piece takes off on its own. That's illumination. That's staying with it until these two come together and bounce up here. You do a lot of this. I do a lot of this and a lot of this in the collage, bringing forth the images and then playing around with the abstract. But it's when they come together, oh, I get it, you know. So when you make a doodle, let's say, I tend to do this. And when I'm building a sculpture, I tend to take hunks of clay and do that. But I know that it will be better if I bring in some straight lines to my sculpture. And so the ones that I tend to choose are like this. Like that. And that's an attempt to bring in the circles and the straight lines. Now, the next thing that we learn to do with our doodles is perspective. So some things are behind others. Tape, please, tape. The next thing that we learn is perspective. And that's the next thing to develop in your doodle. Things are behind things. This is behind that. And this is behind that. And this is behind that. That's interesting. It only has one little leg. That's kind of nice. So things begin to develop. Maybe this is behind something else here, that straight line. Maybe I'll just copy that. So I begin to develop perspective. And we've only known about that for 100 years. Now, the next thing that we learn after what's behind and what's in front is see-through, transparency. And I think that this is the spiritual part of our development, being able to see the meaning in something, see through just the object, see through what we made of that cloud, and to see the majesty of the cloud itself. So, can I do this so that it's maybe transparent behind this? And maybe there's something transparent going on here too. And maybe this has got to be more solid in order for this to work. There's got to be a little bit of see-through going on here. And then I see there's a shape developing here, coming around over here. Now I've got perspective and transparency going on. Maybe this is like sewing and I come out someplace here and take a stitch. Now it's going through. Does this make sense now, this progression? So that's what I mean by the development of the doodle. So that when you looked at your doodle and I asked you to say what is needed, everybody knew. Everybody knew what was needed. And you went for that. So that's, can you hear me? I guess this is silent. So when I asked you to look at your doodle and see what was needed, everybody knew what was needed. That's built into us. No, we know it. And so to develop that abstract ability, that abstract mind, which I think is far more intelligent, is absolutely more intelligent than our conscious mind. And it wants to come through. It can help us now in this state that we're in. Let's go back to that first doodle that you did when you came in. Would you bring it out and let's look at it again?